September 1940. The skies over southern England are alive with the roar of engines and the staccato crack of machine gun fire. Squadron leader Douglas Bader twists his Hawker Hurricane hard left, narrowly avoiding a burst of tracer rounds. The Messerschmitt Bf-109 behind him is deadly accurate. In the first 4 months of the Battle of Britain, RAF Fighter Command lost 1,547 aircraft. German fighters accounted for 792 of those kills. In nearly 3/4 of these engagements, British pilots never saw the enemy before the first shot was fired. Visibility was the silent killer. The Hurricane's rear armor, designed to protect the pilot, created a massive blind spot extending 45 degrees on either side of the tail. Pilots twisted and craned their necks until vertebrae ached, desperately trying to spot enemies closing in from behind. By October 1940, the average combat life of a Hurricane pilot was a mere 87 hours of flight time. 4 weeks. That was all the time a young man had between his first sortie and his last. Meanwhile, at the Royal Aircraft Establishment in Farnborough, senior engineers debated solutions. The Hurricane's canopy could not be redesigned without months of delay. Mirrors created turbulence, slowing the plane by critical miles per hour. Rear-facing cameras were technologically impossible. All conventional solutions failed the test of practicality, speed, or cost. The experts' verdict was unanimous. Pilots would continue dying blind. In Brookland, England, Frederick George Miles was thinking differently. A 34-year-old self-taught engineer who left school at 16. Miles ran a small aircraft company. He had no formal aeronautical training, no degree, and no official influence. But he did something more important. He listened to pilots. During lunch breaks in his workshop, he absorbed their frustrations, their stories, their survival struggles. One pilot, James Nicholson, described a recent encounter with chilling clarity. "I knew he was behind me," Nicholson said, stirring his tea. "I could feel it, but I couldn't confirm it without turning. By the time I did, he had already fired. He put 20mm rounds straight through my reserve tank." Miles leaned forward. "What if you could see him without turning?" he asked quietly. Mirrors had been tried and had failed, but Miles was searching for something no one else had considered. What if the air itself could reveal the enemy? He remembered a winter windstorm months earlier, watching fabric stretched across a frame ripple and vibrate in turbulent air. Aircraft moved through air the same way, leaving wakes, disturbances, turbulence. A pursuing fighter would have to fly through that disturbed air. What if there was a way to make that disturbance visible? At his workbench, Miles fashioned a simple prototype. A strip of lightweight cotton, 18 inches long and 3 inches wide, stretched over a frame made of thin, high-tensile piano wire. The concept was absurdly simple. Attach these strips to the Hurricane's upper wing just behind the cockpit. When air was disturbed by a pursuing aircraft, the strips would ripple, giving the pilot instant visual warning in their peripheral vision. No turning required, no instruments, no mirrors, just the air itself as a sensor. Miles tested the prototype immediately. September 3, 1940. Before dawn, he arrived at a grounded Hurricane with his fabric strips. The installation took 12 minutes. The plane looked ridiculous, the strips fluttering like children's handkerchiefs against the camouflage paint. Test pilot George Bullman arrived, coffee in hand, and froze. "What in God's name is that?" he asked. "Visibility enhancement system," Miles replied calmly. Bullman shook his head. The Air Ministry had not approved this. It hadn't been wind tunnel tested. The plane could be destroyed or the system could fail catastrophically. "Will you flash it?" Miles asked. Bullman hesitated. "If it works, you take full credit. If not, it's on me." Miles nodded. Bullman climbed into the cockpit. The Merlin engine roared to life, and the Hurricane rolled onto the runway. As it lifted off, the strips fluttered violently, but held. For 20 minutes, Bullman pushed the Hurricane through steep climbs, dives, and sharp turns. The strips performed perfectly, detecting even minor disturbances in airflow. By the time the test was over, Bullman's skepticism had vanished. "They work," he said quietly. Miles knew that proving the strips worked to the Air Ministry would be far harder than testing them. The experts had dismissed all prior solutions, and now they would have to accept that a self-taught engineer with scraps of fabric had achieved what they could not. September 10, 1940, Fighter Command Headquarters, Bentley Priory. The same conference room that had declared the Hurricane's rear blind spot unsolvable 3 weeks earlier now hosted Miles and his crewed strips.
Air Vice Marshal Lee Mallory, who had presided over the earlier meeting, stared at the demonstration board. Senior engineers, test pilots, and bureaucrats gathered around, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and condescension. Joseph Smith, successor to Dr. Reginald Mitchell at Supermarine, examined the strips with barely concealed contempt. "This is your solution? Fabric tape?" Miles explained calmly. "They detect disturbances in the airflow caused by pursuing aircraft, giving the pilot instant visual warning, nothing more." Dr. William Farron from the Royal Aircraft Establishment scoffed. "Aerodynamically impossible. The Hurricane's own slipstream would cause constant flutter. Pilots would be distracted constantly. It's worse than useless." Miles distributed flight reports from Burlman's test. In 17 simulated attacks, the strips correctly signaled every approaching aircraft. 0 false positives. The room erupted. Someone shouted about unauthorized testing. Where was wind tunnel data? How about structural load calculations? Sir Henry Tizard raised his hand for silence. Miles interrupted. "Yesterday we lost 14 Hurricanes. Last week, 41. Pilots are dying because they can't see their attackers. This costs 11 shillings per aircraft and takes 20 minutes to install. How many more must die before we try something different?" The room went silent. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, who had quietly entered, finally spoke. "Show me how they work, in the air, not in this room. I will authorize operational testing if it works as claimed." The demonstration was set for September 11, 1940, at North Holt Airfield. 3 Hurricanes lined up on the tarmac. 1 had Miles' strips installed, 2 were unmodified. Squadron leader Douglas Bader, legless but legendary, approached with skepticism. "You want me to fly with handkerchiefs on my wings?" Miles smiled. "I want you to survive." The test was simple. 2 Hurricanes would attempt to approach Bader's blind spot without being seen. First, he would fly the stripped Hurricane, then an unmodified one. Radio silence throughout. Bader climbed to 15,000 feet and began his combat patrol. Below, the 2 chasing aircraft maneuvered into position. In the stripped Hurricane, Bader noticed the strips fluttering in peripheral vision. A distinct wave pattern on the left indicated an approaching aircraft. He broke hard left, narrowly avoiding contact. The right strip rippled moments later. Bader executed a barrel roll, confronting his pursuer head-on. Both strips simultaneously indicated a second approaching plane. The unmodified Hurricane told a different story. Bader twisted and craned, desperately searching. He spotted one attacker by pure chance, the other only when it broke off. The contrast was stark. The fabric strips gave pilots the critical seconds needed to react, seconds that were often the difference between life and death. Operational testing began immediately. Over 10 days, 12 pilots flew 57 simulated combat missions. Without strips, pilots detected pursuing aircraft only 31% of the time at an average distance of 380 yards. With strips, detection jumped to 89% at an average of 520 yards. That extra 140 yards, less than 2 seconds at closing speed, was decisive. On September 25th, Dowding authorized full-scale production and installation. Miles Aircraft received a contract for 10,000 sets. Installation began with frontline squadrons immediately. The difference was almost immediate. By October, reports flooded in from pilots who had survived encounters they previously would have died in. Pilot Officer Eric Lockatch, flying his first mission with the strips, described the sensation. A Bf-109 dropped from his 6 o'clock position. He didn't see it until the strips rippled violently in his peripheral vision. He broke hard right just in time, avoiding cannon fire that would have torn through the cockpit and fuel tanks. His Hurricane took 3 bullet holes in the tail, but Lockatch emerged unscathed. The statistics confirmed what the pilots experienced. September 1940, before the strips, the Hurricane loss rate to fighter attack was 73 aircraft per 1,000 sorties. November 1940, after the strips, the rate dropped to 44 per 1,000, a 40% reduction. In human terms, 40% fewer telegrams to mothers, wives, and children, 40% more pilots surviving to fight another day. The Germans noticed. Luftwaffe intelligence described mysterious fabric devices on RAF fighters. Captured pilots reported Hurricanes evading attacks before they opened fire, some thinking the British had installed radar. In reality, it was Miles strips, costing just 11 shillings, that saved lives.
By December 1940, Miles's strips, now officially designated Airflow Warning Devices, Type M, were standard equipment on 47 Hurricanes. The modification spread quickly to other aircraft, including Spitfires in January 1941. Even American P-51 Mustangs used modified versions starting in 1943. What had begun as a simple idea, a few strips of fabric, was now saving lives across multiple air forces. Operational research after the initial deployment confirmed the strip's life-saving effect. Pilots who statistically should have died survived encounters due to the early warning provided. Conservative estimates by the RAF suggested at least 340 pilots survived directly because of Miles's innovation. These were not just numbers. They represented sons, husbands, and fathers returning home. They trained new pilots, fought in North Africa, Italy, and France, and ensured the continuation of Allied air superiority. Eric Lockatch, the 20-year-old pilot who had faced the Bf-109, became one of the RAF's top aces, eventually credited with 26 kills. He credited the strips with saving his life on multiple occasions, but he never forgot the human element, the instinctual trust between pilot and technology. Lockatch survived the Battle of Britain and went on to train a generation of pilots. 3 of his trainees credited their survival to lessons learned from him, which in turn originated from Miles's simple fabric strips. The German pilots began reporting strange phenomena. They had previously relied on surprise attacks, taking advantage of the Hurricane's blind spot. Now, British pilots seemed to anticipate their moves. Intelligence reports noted Hurricanes executing evasive maneuvers almost instinctively. Some Luftwaffe pilots suspected radar or secret technology, unaware that the secret weapon was nothing more than fabric fluttering in the wind. Miles never sought fame. He refused recognition, interviews, or to write his memoirs. Even official histories of the war omitted his name. He often said, "The strips worked because pilots trusted their instincts. I just gave them a tool. The courage was theirs, not mine." This humility defined him, even as his work saved hundreds of lives and significantly altered the course of aerial combat in the Second World War. After the war, the principles behind Miles's innovation found new applications. Modern fighter jets use radar warning receivers, missile approach warning systems, and 360-degree sensor fusion. Even today, UAVs rely on pressure-sensitive arrays to detect nearby aircraft through wake turbulence, an evolution of Miles's concept. The physics remains unchanged, only the implementation has evolved. Miles spent his post-war years designing light aircraft and mentoring young engineers, quietly passing on the lessons he had learned. He died in 1976 at age 70. His obituary in the Times mentioned his wartime work in a single sentence. No Air Ministry officials attended his funeral. Yet in 2003, a group of Battle of Britain veterans commissioned a memorial plaque at Miles's former factory. Frederick George Miles, 1906 to 1976, engineer. His fabric strips gave us seconds. Those seconds gave us our lives. The story of Miles's strips is not just about a clever engineering hack. It is about courage, persistence, and the willingness to challenge accepted norms. It is about seeing potential in simplicity when the world demands complexity. Miles's invention proved that sometimes the smallest ideas make the biggest difference. 11 shillings of fabric and a refusal to accept the status quo saved hundreds of lives, changed the course of a war, and inspired generations of engineers and innovators. The ripple effect went far beyond the immediate survival of pilots. Every pilot saved by the strips trained new pilots,
fought new battles, and passed on their experience. The exponential impact on Allied air strategy was profound. From North Africa to Italy, from France to the skies over Germany, pilots were alive today because of a fabric strip fluttering in the wind. Miles's principle, detecting threats through airflow disturbances, would influence aerial tactics and aircraft design for decades to come. Even as aircraft technology advanced, the core lesson remained. Trust simple solutions when complexity seems inevitable. Miles demonstrated that innovation does not always require expensive labs, advanced degrees, or government backing. Sometimes, all it takes is attention to detail, a willingness to experiment, and the courage to act when others hesitate. By the end of the war, Miles's airflow warning devices had been installed on over 23,000 aircraft. Pilots across 5 air forces, RAF, RCAF, RNZAF, and USA Air Forces, benefited directly. Post-war analysis confirmed that hundreds of lives were saved and countless missions were completed successfully because of Miles's strips. The effect extended well beyond statistics. It was the preservation of human potential in the survival of skills, knowledge, and leadership essential for the post-war world. Miles's work was an enduring reminder that ingenuity is often overlooked when it does not fit conventional expectations. In a world obsessed with authority and credentials, a self-taught engineer with scraps of fabric proved that boldness, creativity, and action can overcome even the most rigid systems. The simple flutter of fabric, dismissed by experts as absurd, became one of the most effective life-saving devices in aviation history.
The story of Frederick George Miles did not end with the war. His invention, which had saved hundreds of lives and transformed aerial combat, remained largely unknown to the public. Unlike famous military leaders or celebrated inventors, Miles did not seek fame, awards, or recognition. He insisted that credit belonged to the pilots, the men who flew into combat daily, trusting their instincts and risking their lives. In the immediate post-war years, Miles returned to his aircraft company, focusing on light aircraft design and mentoring young engineers. He became a teacher of ingenuity, demonstrating to aspiring engineers that resourcefulness and attention to detail could solve real-world problems more effectively than textbook theory alone. His lessons emphasized observation, experimentation, and the courage to test ideas, no matter how unconventional they appeared. The technological principle behind Miles's fabric strips, using airflow disturbances to detect hidden threats, remained relevant. It influenced the development of modern aircraft sensors, UAV detection systems, and even missile approach warning systems. Today, fighter jets rely on sophisticated electronics and radar arrays, but the underlying idea remains. Detecting threats indirectly can save lives. Miles's contribution bridged the gap between primitive mechanical solutions and the high-tech sensors of the modern era. The human element of Miles's invention was equally profound. Each pilot saved by the strips not only survived a deadly encounter, but went on to shape the post-war world. They trained new pilots, contributed to the rebuilding of nations, and passed on experience gained in life or death situations. In effect, Miles's strips did not just preserve lives, they preserved knowledge, leadership, and the continuity of expertise essential for global recovery. Memorials and plaques would later recognize Miles's work, but always in the shadows of greater histories. The 2003 plaque at his former factory in Brooklyn, England, stood as one of the few public acknowledgments of his life-saving invention. Frederick George Miles, 1906 to 1976, engineer. His fabric strips gave us seconds. Those seconds gave us our lives. The lesson of Miles's life and invention extends beyond aviation. It is a testament to the power of human ingenuity, the courage to act when conventional wisdom fails, and the impact one person can have on the lives of many. His strips were not about technological sophistication.
They were about practicality, observation, and trust in human instincts. Sometimes, the simplest ideas, if implemented at the right moment, can change the course of history. Miles's life exemplifies humility. Despite saving hundreds of lives and profoundly influencing aerial warfare, he never claimed fame or sought recognition. He avoided the press, declined interviews, and refused to be included in official histories. To him, the victory belonged to the pilots who applied his innovation in the skies. His philosophy was simple: tools are only as valuable as those who wield them. Courage, skill, and instinct mattered more than accolades or public acknowledgement. The story of Miles's fabric strips continues to inspire engineers, pilots, and innovators. It reminds us that breakthroughs often come from those outside the established system, from individuals willing to question authority, trust their instincts, and act decisively. His work demonstrates that even the most modest materials, a few strips of cotton and some piano wire, can have monumental consequences when combined with creativity and courage. In today's era of rapid technological advancement, the essence of Miles's approach is more relevant than ever. Innovations do not always require cutting-edge labs or complex machinery. They require observation, understanding, and the bravery to implement solutions when others hesitate. Miles's strips were a literal and metaphorical example of this principle. Small, seemingly insignificant, yet powerful enough to save lives and alter history. As aircraft technology advanced, the principle of detecting disturbances to anticipate danger evolved into modern radar and sensor systems. Miles's legacy persists not only in aviation technology, but in the mindset of engineers and problem solvers. Solutions need not be complicated to be effective. Sometimes, the simplest idea, pursued relentlessly, is the most revolutionary. Frederick George Miles passed away in 1976 at age 70, leaving behind a legacy hidden in plain sight. He was neither famous nor widely celebrated, but his contribution saved countless lives and influenced the evolution of aerial warfare. The ripple effects of his invention endured through generations, illustrating the profound impact that one single determined individual can have on the world. Today, when modern pilots soar through the skies in highly sophisticated jets, Miles' simple strips remind us that innovation is not measured solely by technology, but the lives it protects and the problems it solves.
His story is a timeless testament to courage, ingenuity, and the enduring power of practical, human-centered solutions.